Hey guys, it's Dan. Welcome back. I've got another quick remediation project for a unit that is totally done, painted, based, finished. What I'm calling a late Dark Age Scottish force here. I'd read somewhere that the medieval Scots, anyway, at least in some conflicts, had worn really bright yellows in the battle, which I was taken with, so I ran with it. But when I was done, I don't know, I felt that the unit was kind of missing some flair in spite of the really bright yellow tunics. So I decided I wanted to go and paint some war paint on these guys. This is, incidentally, the way I would recommend doing war paint, which is to fully finish the model, and then kind of like blood effects where you would go and do that absolutely last. I would do war paint absolutely last, because if you have parts of it with like the skin still exposed, like you don't want it to look like it's an integrated part of the model. You want it to look like it's tacked on top afterwards, which is what we're doing in a very literal sense here by going in once the model's done. Yeah, so what I'm applying here, this is Techless Blue. Again, it's that like old enchanted blue color, which is, I thought, coupled nicely with the yellow that I had chosen for the tunics here. And all I'm doing is I'm going in, and you can see I'm not going nuts with it because the unit's already pretty vibrant with the yellows. But just in kind of random patterns, applying some face paint just in different patterns that seem like they fit. You want to ensure you have good coverage here. As I said, I'm not going overboard with it. It's just going to be little like accent colors here and there. That Techless Blue color, it's a nice like pastel-y kind of color that I had mentioned in the Weathered Shields tutorial video, has decent coverage for a layer paint. So that's all I'm doing. I'm going in with a detail brush here. You want to be super careful because obviously these are finished models, and it's very difficult if you like screw up and get a bunch in the hair or something like that to fix that, because you essentially have to go back to whatever stage you painted the hair at and then redo it from there. So it's important that you're steady at this phase. And as I generally say with any kind of work like this, it's to not go nuts with it. So I'm going to go through with all of them. Everybody's going to get something. Some are just going to get on, flat areas like helmets. There's a few actually where there's very little face showing because of the helmets that I had chosen. There are some that have like shaved heads like me that have like stripes going down like a mohawk or something like that. So you can have fun with it. That's kind of what I did. These models are actually a kit bash from a couple of different manufacturers. There's Victrix, Warlord, Wargames Atlantic from their Blood Oath Irish set, and Gripping Beast. So it's a decent blend from different manufacturers, all kind of in a Dark Age setting and aesthetic. So what we're working toward here, we're going to put a base layer down on all these miniatures. Everybody's going to get a little bit of war paint on them. And then we'll do a very light dry brush to pick up some details. And then I don't always paint eyes on miniatures at this scale. I find that you can oftentimes do more harm than good. But in this particular case, I do paint the eyes and then the pupils for reasons that I'll go into once we get to that step. But so you can see here in the back here, I've base coated everybody with just a single layer of Techless Blue. And it's okay if there's still some skin showing through. It doesn't have to be perfect coverage because, again, it's supposed to look like paint just hastily applied before battle. And so what I'm going to do now, as we saw with the Conquistador tutorial that I put out, or not really tutorial, but walkthrough, is very light dusting of white. And that first one I left in is a case study on what not to do. So there's way too much paint on that brush. So wiped a lot of it off, went back, and dry brushed the rest. So just for some perspective, I think I reloaded that brush a single time. So over 30 models, I only had 2 loaded dry brushes, and that was sufficient to dry brush everything in white, just to pick up some raised areas, give the miniature a little bit of depth. So you can see it's a careful coating, and there's some areas like on helmets and whatnot that have flat surfaces that there's nothing to pick up on. That one must have a little bit of wet, that's why I put it aside. But there's a couple of them like that on top of his head that you're not going to pick anything up, so don't even bother. Whereas if it's over, the brow or the ridge of the nose, hands, things like that, I would give it just a quick dry brush. You can see just a couple of flicks back and forth, and that's enough. And then what we move into here, the next step is I take my Agrex Earthshade wash mix and don't do as nearly as heavy a wash as I would if I was essentially dipping the model. All I'm doing is going in and just dropping in a little bit of pigment, a little bit of ink in the recesses, like directly into the recesses. I don't want to coat the entire thing. And you can see same thing there. If there's some areas where I didn't even bother to dry brush it, I didn't, in this case, even bother to put a wash on it. You can see that was too much, so I went back in and took some away. So yeah, all you're doing just going into a careful wash application here. And you could be done at this stage. If you don't feel like painting eyes, then skip it, whatever. But for me, at least with these miniatures that I was painting, I feel like sometimes when a miniature doesn't have skin tone where skin tone should be, it looks unfinished unless you go through and paint an eye. So especially with face paint, for me anyway, it looks like an unfinished side of the face there. So to complete the illusion, what I am going to do is go through and paint some eyes. So for anyone that's not used to painting eyes, it requires very detailed brush, like the most detail-y brush you got, and brace your hands. Like, just put them against the side of the table, brace the model. I sometimes will have like my left hand braced against the table in addition to my arms being braced against the table, just to keep it as steady as you possibly can. And the key is to, even if you have to go in multiple times, to start small and kind of work your way out. This is actually a good example of what to not do. So like right there, that was enough. And then I kept going and I smushed, and so now the left eye is a little bit big. We can actually kind of fix that in the pupil application step, but the key, as with many things in painting, is to start small. You can always go back in and add more. But just a little dot, less than you think you need, I think is another takeaway I would suggest. So just a little dot. And again, you could be done here if you want. Anyway, think that the white eyes, especially over the blue war paint, kind of make them look possessed. So I decided to go in and paint some pupils. So painting pupils is the same philosophy, just even smaller scale. And to avoid having like kind of googly, crazy eyes on them, what I recommend you do is start from the top of the white of the eye and kind of work your way down, because that's essentially where you're dropping the pupil in, is toward the middle top of the eye. And there you go. So you can see, same philosophy applies. Apply less than you think you need. Start in the top and kind of drag it down toward the center of the eye. And if on the first eye you don't put it in exactly the right position, don't panic, but try to then copy it on the other eye. And I can't tell you how many models in this unit are like side-eyeing, because like this, you can see it's not in the middle, it's like over on his right. So I copy that on the left eye. I paint the pupil deliberately over toward the side of the eye. And you can see it actually ends up working once you do it that way. So again, take your time with it and don't panic if you make a mistake. It's easy to fix. What I actually recommend, one of two things: either starting over, you can just like reapply the skin tone, wash it, paint an eye in white, and then go back in to redo the pupil. I'm too lazy to do that. Usually if I screw up an eye, I will do I'll give him a scar, which is the step I'm going to show you here. The footage for this didn't turn out great, but I'll talk you through it and you can at least get an idea of what I'm doing. To make a scar, what I usually do is I take whatever skin tone I used, mix in some pink. In this case, I think it's Screamer pink, like a 50-50 mix of skin tone. You can use maroon too, like corn red, something like that, whatever red you've got. But about a 50-50 mix of your skin tone and a reddish, pinkish color. And then you're going to apply that as like a stripe, as you see there. And then what I'll do for the next step is I'll mix in white. So that mixture that's a 50-50 blend of skin tone and red or maroon or pink, I then add about 50% white and then brighten it up, and then I'll do a single highlight on it. And again, it looks kind of washed out here. It looks like it's all skin tone, but it does have a pink scar going down. So that's a fun trick that I typically use when I'm trying to cover up mistakes. And here you go. So again, put them on the Lazy Susan, taking a spin. Don't ask me why they've got a Norse banner. They've taken Danelaw very seriously, I guess. But there you go. That's the finished unit. Again, simple enough application. You can either, expand this, scale it up, rein it in, whatever it is you need. You can obviously use different colors too. So again, just a little quick tutorial for you. Appreciate you stopping by, guys. Till next time, happy gaming.